merry meet, my fellow bookish witches. Welcome to Witchy Reads, a place where we talk about books and other bookish things. The book is always better than the movie is a statement that I do not stand by. You might be surprised, or not, if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, that I think that there are plenty of movies that are, in fact, better than the book they happen to be adapted from. But I have something potentially even more heinous to admit to you all. There are adaptations that are objectively bad movies that I adore.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
I thought it would be a hoot to share some of those adaptations with you today. I do not expect people to agree with me here. That is perfectly fine. In fact, just might be the point of this video. Just remember, interests are subjective. Bearing that in mind, hear me out. I made a little hear me out cake for the occasion. Let's see how this goes. First one, here we go. Perfect. Beautiful. It's on the cake. Horns is a 2013 supernatural comedy horror mystery film based on the book Horns by Joe Hill. The film stars Daniel Radcliffe as the main character, Ig, Juno Temple as Ig's girlfriend, Marin, and Max Minghella as Ig's best friend and antagonist, Lee. There are also important side characters such as Ig's brother, Terry, played by Joe Anderson. Heather Graham plays a random waitress. Sabrina Carpenter is here playing the child version of Marin. Thought that was interesting. The story follows Ig as he lives in the aftermath of his girlfriend's murder. He is suspect number one. The only person who seems to believe that he is innocent is his best friend, Lee. We are talking not even his parents or brother truly believe he isn't in some way responsible for Marin's death.
How could you do it? She was one of the best people I ever knew. She was my favorite thing about you.
One day, Ig wakes up to find that he has grown a set of devil horns. Much like how he has been isolated by being made the town pariah, he's the only one who seems freaked out by this new development. He quickly learns that his new horns include the addition of certain abilities, namely influencing others to perform certain acts, admitting their deepest, darkest secrets, reading minds, and controlling snakes.
What's that snake doing around your neck?
Made a new friend.
Very much devil aesthetic powers. Once Ig begins using these powers to investigate his girlfriend's murder is when the real shenanigans begin. Ig is making people confess their secrets to him in the most diabolical, weird ways. He's making people do unimaginable acts, sometimes without even meaning to, that end in hilariously dark consequences. I'll admit, when I saw this scene in the trailer,
you know what, I got an idea. How about you guys beat the shit out of each other, and the winner gets an exclusive interview with me.
I knew this was a movie I would enjoy. Surrounding all this mayhem is Ig's determination to find the truth about what happened to Marin. If you couldn't figure it out already, Ig is innocent. The movie also has flashbacks that follow Ig and Marin's relationship leading up to the night of her murder, which is an interesting way to depict the timeline as Ig gains more information, and it's also an interesting way for us to get to know the character of Marin. It's kind of biased in a way because we are only really seeing her through the eyes of Ig. Once he has interrogated everyone in town and hasn't come up with any real leads, he discovers that Lee, his best friend, has a few secrets that he hasn't shared. And he hasn't shared them because he has been wearing Marin's cross necklace, which he claims was given to him from her. Ig doesn't want to believe this because the implications of it being true is that Marin and Lee were having an affair. Lee does admit to this. Still, Ig doesn't feel like this is the whole truth. It doesn't make sense with all the other information he has managed to gather about the night she died. This is when the movie goes a bit off the rails. We learn that the necklace is what was protecting Lee from Ig's powers. Once it is removed from Lee, it is revealed to Ig what exactly happened the night of Marin's death. He immediately wants to kill Lee, justifiably so. Lee fights back and at first gets the upper hand, but then Ig just turns into a full-fledged devil and makes Lee swallow a large snake whole, which ends him. In the process of all this, Ig also loses his life. The movie ends sort of bittersweetly as he is able to be with Mirren finally. This adaptation is both dark and goofy as hell, which is why I love it and why I would guess not many others did. I'll be the first to admit that the tone does feel all over the place. I actually watched the movie first because I loved it so much I decided to give the book a shot. I wish I hadn't. Joe Hill is the author's pen name. His real name is Joseph Hillstrom King. He is the son of famed author Stephen King. I have my own beef with the books I've read by Stephen King, but I was not going to let that factor into my reading experience with this book. I gave Hill the benefit of the doubt. His book is basically everything that I despise about King's writing, especially his older stuff. The entire book reads as a Christian pamphlet on the sins of women, with the vibes of the King James Bible. Absolutely touches a lot more on the religious supernatural themes, but instead of it being quirky, it is dark and very pointed at women being in cahoots with the devil. After reading the book, I am much more appreciative that the movie went for a lighter tone and removed a lot of the religious connotations, especially surrounding women. I think this also helped with the horror comedy tone that is the majority of the film. Less a serious reflection of a person's soul, Ig sprouting literal devil horns in response to the loss of faith over Mirren's murder plays much better as a quirky side effect of his grief and resentment versus it being some shallow symbolism of God versus Satan. So yeah, the tone of the adaptation might feel off. I really liked the dark comedy tone that the adaptation went for, which I think was a missed opportunity for the book. Much like his father, Hill seems to need to have his books reworked for the better in order to make a decent adaptation. My hot take is that the movie is the only benefit to having this book exist. While the adaptation may not have been a hit, and while many might not appreciate it the way I do, it is still one of my favorite adaptations. All right, next we have The Time Traveler's Wife. Put it up here, I think. Oh my gosh, my cake. Okay. The Time Traveler's Wife is a science fiction romance film that was released in 2009 and is adapted from the novel The Time Traveler's Wife by Audrey Niffenegger. There is also a television series that was adapted in 2022, but I haven't seen that, so I won't be talking about that one. The film stars Eric Bana as the main character, Henry, and Rachel McAdams as his love interest and eventual wife, Claire. If I had a nickel for every time Rachel McAdams played a love interest in a film that deals with bending time and space, I would have 3 nickels, which isn't much, but it's weird that it happened more than once. I think both the book and the adaptation each had their own flaws, but ultimately the adaptation pulled ahead as far as my personal experience in consuming both mediums. This mainly has to do with the characters being presented better on the screen versus on the page. This could be due to Bana and McAdams' performances, but in the end, I think the book characters come off as way more unlikable. A weird choice to make for 2 characters who we as readers are meant to root for.
I wouldn't change anything. I would not give up 1 second of our life together.
The story follows Henry as he goes about his life living with a very specific affliction. He spontaneously time travels without warning and without his clothes. He is handling this bizarre, inconvenient trait in the best way he knows how, which is to say, not at all. Until one day, a young lady recognizes him. This is Claire. She has known Henry her whole life. He has only just met her. So begins a winding love story that traverses time and different lives lived. It makes you wonder how set our choices are in life. Can you change the path you are on? Would you want to? Despite it being marketed as a sci-fi romance, it is also a drama. Don't expect a happy ending. One of the major reasons I prefer the adaptation over the book is that I think the movie at least ends on a bittersweet note, whereas the book's ending is just bleak, in my opinion. This seems to be the theme throughout the entirety of the book that was thankfully lessened in the adaptation. The adaptation managed to make the romance believable and made you actually care about these characters. Of course, this is at the detriment of the more sci-fi elements. If I may be so bold, the book doesn't do a great job of covering those narrative bits. I see it as a net positive that the adaptation didn't really try. Don't get me wrong, I think the sci-fi concepts are interesting and worth delving into.
You time traveled?
Mom says you and I are exactly alike. Except Dr. Kendrick says I'm a prodigy, because sometimes I can choose where I go.
You can control it.
It's not done well in the book, just straight up pushed aside once the romance aspect kicks in. The adaptation just completely ignores the sci-fi aspects. I feel like if it was given more time, say in a TV series, they could have done more with that. As it stands, I'm okay with them deciding to lean more into the romance aspect in the adaptation. The sci-fi narrative is only brought back momentarily when Henry and Claire have a child who has inherited Henry's ability, but has an evolved version that allows her to pick her destination in time and sometimes allows her to prevent herself from traveling when she doesn't want to. The point is, if you choose to read the book or watch the adaptation, be prepared for a melancholy, borderline heartbreaking story that might leave you feeling you got nothing out of it. This is definitely one of those adaptations that I watch when I want to feel down, but can easily bounce back after the film's hour and 45-minute runtime. Does anyone else do that? Am I the only one? Frankly, I don't begrudge anyone who doesn't want to sit with those kinds of feelings for that long. I think it's the adaptation leading more into the romance plot that makes the darker aspects easier to digest. It helps you not think about them for too long, which for some stories I'm fine with, and this happens to be one of them. I know this is an adaptation that is not loved or even liked by fans of the book, or even those who have never read the book. I unironically like the adaptation for what it is. Next, we have The Lovely Bones. Let's move it on over here. Let's get it on the cake. Look at that. Beautiful. On the cake. Yep, there it is. Gorgeous. The Lovely Bones is a young adult supernatural fantasy film adaptation released in 2009 based on the novel The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold. This is a heavy story with many emotionally complex themes, which would make any attempt at an adaptation interesting, to say the least. I personally think that the adaptation manages to navigate the often dark, sometimes whimsical nature of death, the pain of child loss, and the bitterness of not getting closure to a tragedy, but still managing to move on in a beautifully fantastical way, which is more profound than it gets credit for. The story basically follows a young preteen girl named Susie who is tricked, kidnapped, essayed, and murdered by her creepy neighbor, who we learn as the story goes on has a history of doing this same thing to many different young girls. While the movie avoids being overtly gory, there is enough shown to get the point across. We then follow Susie as she navigates the whimsical nature of a limbo/afterlife with her neighbor's other victims as she watches her family grieve her and eventually come to the realization that they most likely won't get closure for her death. She also has to suffer watching them move on while she stays stagnant in her universe. Her family never gets that closure because her body is never found, and no one is ever convicted for her disappearance or death. If you go into the book or the adaptation expecting a happy resolution to this dark story, I hate to be the one to disappoint you. That's not how this story ends. There are even moments that might frustrate you. I do believe that is the idea. The point is to show how you need to work past grief, even if you never get the closure you desire. I think the big reason this adaptation isn't more beloved is because it is an extremely hard watch, especially if you happen to be a parent. Emotionally draining to the point where a second watch could be downright impossible for some. I include myself in that group. Not to mention, watching Stanley Tucci as a creepy child monster messes with your brain in a way you might not be prepared for. Rounding out the cast, we have Saoirse Ronan as Susie Salmon, Mark Wahlberg and Rachel Weisz as her parents, and Susan Sarandon as her grandmother. Spectacular cast. I'm not the biggest Wahlberg fan. I do think his performance here was great as a hurt, angry, grieving father who is having to come to terms with the fact that he will likely never get the answers he wants or the justice his daughter deserved. This is what I mean about this adaptation being emotionally heavy. The book is the same way, but I do think the book provides a different way to digest disturbing or upsetting content. This is why I think the adaptation succeeds, even if most people don't agree. The only thing I will concede on is that Jackson probably did go a little too heavy on the fantastical elements. I really don't think they take away from the core of the story or the movie's impact. In fact, I think those fantastical elements enhance the dark, childlike wonder in how death is portrayed, especially such a gruesome death. As hard as the adaptation is to watch, and even if many feel the fantastical tone doesn't fit, I do think this adaptation is an important watch. There is a benefit to anchoring these dark, whimsical stories through the point of view of children. This is why I'm glad this adaptation exists, and why I think it's a good one. Second to last one. Here we go. The Beach. Get on that in there. Yep. All right. Looking good. Hear me out, cake. The Beach is an adventure drama film that released in 2000 based on the novel The Beach by Alex Garland. This film did not do well, and I get why that is. And yet, I loved it. Even though I did watch this probably about 5 years out from its release, it was still during Leonardo DiCaprio's hot 90s era, which probably had a lot to do with my first impressions of this film. Aside from the story, the film is visually gorgeous. I attribute that to it being shot on location. Funnily enough, the fact that it was shot on location is where a good chunk of the criticism of the film comes from. During filming, a storm destroyed the movie set, which led to parts of the beach ecosystem being injured or destroyed. Hi guys, Editing Witchy here. In doing my research the first time around, for some reason, I thought it was a storm that had destroyed the set. In actuality, it's something much more sinister. The film crew and production companies basically went in, uprooted a bunch of plant life, destroyed the ecosystem of the beach, and now, years later, the beach is still suffering for it. I know that the government of Thailand, which is where the filming took place, has basically sued the production companies, one of them being 20th Century Fox. They are being ordered to pay to fix the damage that was done to the beach. I am not sure if that is going to rectify the situation, make it better. In addition to the filming causing issues, there has obviously been a uptick in tourists coming and destroying the beach as well since the film's release. But I just wanted to clear up that little misunderstanding on my part. It was not a storm. It was humans. This didn't go over well with environmentalists. I'm not going to defend that aspect of the film. Looking at the film itself, I think it is an interesting visual feast that gives off a sense of freedom or utopia that young travelers likely want to experience. On the other hand, I can see how it could be interpreted as another depiction of rich white kids that, through privilege, have the means to travel to countries that they don't fully understand, nor do they try to understand. Instead, they seek out the most whitewashed community they can find. And, surprise, surprise, they happen to gatekeep actual locals of the country they are squatting in from the paradise they effectively hoard for themselves, though they will try to convince you otherwise. This isn't a criticism strictly placed on the adaptation. The book portrays this as well. The film is actually a fairly accurate adaptation of the book, in my opinion. This is one of the few times that I don't think the book or the movie is better or worse than the other. They just exist. The reason I might like the adaptation more is simply how striking the visuals are, how gorgeous everything looks. further proving that sometimes a different medium can shift how a story is portrayed and be taken in by its audience. I also think DiCaprio portrays the main character, Alex, very well. A perfect casting choice to play a cocky white guy who thinks he knows better, thinks he's learned something profound by the end. The story follows DiCaprio's character, Richard, after he inherits a map to a beach oasis off the coast of Southeast Asia after a fellow traveler unalives himself. What follows is a series of events that lead Richard, along with a French couple he befriends, to this beach oasis where a community of Westerners have set up a home of sorts. Kind of like a commune, led randomly by Tilda Swinton. The truth is, it's just a place to run away from the real world, from real problems. This quickly becomes evident once this paradise eventually becomes stale, and the real problems enter the facade. It's not as special as it purports to be. The true darkness of escaping the real world into a facade is revealed. The book does portray the thriller drama aspect a little better than the adaptation. The movie is more of a fun traveler's fantasy vibe that can't seem to manage the darker thriller plot points within the narrative. That doesn't stop me from getting some enjoyment from this film. For me, it is definitely about the feeling of wanderlust it evokes, the fact that this is a fantasy that could exist in the real world, and the film does a beautiful job of showing that to the audience. It's why I was captivated by it. This is what makes the adaptation worth watching. To get the grander message of the story, I would probably also recommend reading the book. If you want some stunning visuals with tropical beach vibes, I would say you might enjoy this movie. Though, who knows if you'd like it, since most obviously didn't. Save for me. For the last one, we have Ender's Game. Looks good. Ender's Game is a 2013 young adult sci-fi action film adaptation of the book Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. When the movie was first announced, my only requirement was that the zero-gravity fight sequences were well done. Personally, I think they pulled it off. I had a great time watching this adaptation. Asa Butterfield plays the titular Ender, genius extraordinaire and only 6 years old when he is labeled a potential chosen one, but he doesn't know that yet. He is sent to a special battle school to prepare for a potential alleged alien attack. He meets many other children who are also considered geniuses in their own right. They are there to form his team for the practice battles and eventually his subordinate soldiers in the war to come. He also meets the leader of the battle school, played by Harrison Ford, and its famous graduate, who is played by Ben Kingsley. Ford does perform this character like he is about to fall asleep at any moment. Surprisingly, it's not the worst acting I've ever seen, so I give him a pass. Ben Kingsley is doing the best he can, but he is kind of wasted in this role, which is a shame. Viola Davis is also here being fabulous per usual. The real focus is on the kids, particularly Butterfield, who is doing so much for the character of Ender. The way he uses his emotional range to bring the character to life is pretty impressive, particularly during the more emotional scenes.
Come on, fight! Come on! I could break your arm!
I think he was perfectly cast, as made evident that he managed to bring forth the complexity of the character without needing to see inside his head, which is always a risk with adaptations of books that were written in first person. Then, of course, we have the zero-gravity battle scenes that I very much was looking forward to seeing on the big screen after reading this book. I would say, for me, they did not disappoint. Sure, they weren't perfect, but at least they didn't try to make them anything different from what it was in the book. I was extremely happy and would gladly watch the movie again just for those scenes. Despite the many praises I could give this adaptation, there is still one part that the book manages to do better. I wouldn't consider it a fault of the adaptation, just that it was something that was going to be difficult to translate from page to screen. I'm talking about the twist at the end. It's not that it wasn't well shot, but the gravitas of the moment wasn't adequately set up to get the appropriate gut punch reaction to it. I remember reading the book and being completely flabbergasted by that twist. Had I only seen the movie, I do not believe I would have had the same reaction. So it works better in the book. Adaptations really need to get back to the days where they trusted their audiences to just get it. By hand-holding audiences and giving not so subtle clues throughout the film, you are effectively ruining any big reaction you were hoping to get from your audience because they kind of see it coming. Let the audience figure it out. They'll be fine. This is part of why media literacy is dying. It takes away the fun part. There are other minor issues that others have pointed out. Honestly, those things don't bother me as much. The biggest thing being that the entire movie is like watching a Let's Play YouTube video. One, I watch Let's Play videos voluntarily in real life. Two, I didn't really go into this adaptation expecting it to be great. I wanted the battle sequences to be great, and personally, I wasn't disappointed. Well, that's it. These are the quote-unquote bad adaptations that I genuinely like. They are part of my final Hear Me Out cake. Look at it. Isn't it beautiful? It's gorgeous. I don't expect a lot of people to agree with this Hear Me Out list. Everyone has bad media that they love, and this just happens to be some of mine. That does make me curious though. What are your Hear Me Out adaptations? Is there an adaptation, or two, or three, that you are willing to defend, even if they are objectively bad? If you enjoyed this video and would like to support my channel, the best way to do that right now is to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and leave a little comment to let me know that you were here. It really is a big help, and I greatly appreciate it. Until our next chapter together, merry part and blessed be.